As much as you might want to bellyache, there are some screenwriting rules. Now, not as many as you think, and if it makes you feel any better, just, call them guidelines or something. But as any good writer knows, when faced with rules or guidelines, there must also be ways to cheat or, work around them a little bit. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A tool to help you cheat just a little. Now, you can't overuse it, okay, but you can use it. And it's called hanging a lantern.
The lantern.
Dad.
It's part of Freemason teachings. In King Solomon's temple, there was a winding staircase. It signified the journey that had to be made to find the light of truth. The lantern is the clue.
No, not that kind of lantern.
Okay, boys, what's going on? The British came by sea with 2 lanterns, not 1.
Ian needed another clue, so we gave it to him.
It was fake. It was a fake clue.
Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. Interact in some way if you find value, like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff. There's also some resources below that might be helpful to you. Let's jump in. Hanging a lantern hasn't always been called by that term. You might also hear terms like lamp shading or lampshade hanging, spotlighting, hanging a red flag, but more commonly it's just called hanging a lantern or hang a lantern on it. But it has been used in storytelling for quite a while. In fact, here's an example from Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. If this were played upon a stage now, I could condemn it as an improbable fiction. In other words, the events at the moment seem so ludicrous that if we were actually in a play, like if you're standing there saying that line and you're thinking this is just not real. If this was a play, we would say this is just unbelievable. It's not going to happen. And that's kind of getting at what hanging a lantern is. So what is hanging a lantern? Well, it's when a character in the story points out a flaw, either one of logic or of plot, but then the character just goes along with that flaw anyway. They accept it. And in turn, that causes us, the audience, to accept it or just dismiss it. We just stop paying attention to it. We don't worry about it. Not a big deal because the character accepted it. Usually, this is used in instances where Deus Ex Machina is in play. The hand of the storyteller is helping someone out in the story, and it just kind of helps explain some of that away. So if you're using Deus Ex Machina, you might also be wanting to pair it with hanging a lantern on it, depending on the nature of it, because it might help dismiss some things. And really, this is part of the key of hanging a lantern on something, is when a character accepts something. So when they see a flaw, when they see an issue, and they accept it, that causes us to accept it. So it just kind of helps the story move along. Later you reflect on it, you think, well, that just doesn't seem quite right. But honestly, it tends to work in the moment and most people don't really think about it. So it's a great tool to use. And that's what it is. But what might it be used for? Assume that there is a flaw, right? Or a minor hole in the plot. And when someone in the audience notices it, this is going to pull them out of the story. It impacts their suspension of belief, right? We want them to believe that everything is going on, and if they see something that just is a minor flaw in the plot, and we're going to be like, I don't know. But if a character points out that flaw, and then they go along with it, okay? So they point out the flaw, and the character's like, you know what? I'm just going along. The audience tends to go along as well. Here's a great example from Age of Ultron.
It's your fault. It's everyone's fault. Who cares? Are you up for this? Are you? Look, I just need to know because the city is flying. Okay, look, the city is flying. We're fighting an army of robots. And I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes sense. But I'm going back out there because it's my job.
Now in this clip, Hawkeye knows this is crazy, and he points out what all is going on. There's robots, we're flying, I've got a bow and arrow, this is dumb. And we might be thinking the same thing too. We might be thinking, this is too much. But if Hawkeye's in, well, you know what? I'm in too. If he's gonna do it, okay, I'm in. And this is a really solid example of using hanging a lantern on something. It's just hanging a lantern, it's shining a light on this area. Everybody's seeing the hole, but we're shining light on it and saying, yeah, we all see the hole, we're going with it. And we as the audience go, okay. Another time to hang a lantern on something is when there is a minor flaw in logic. So say we believe something to be true. You and I believe something to be true. And if we see that truth getting broken in the story, well, that's a logic flaw. So let's say, for example, that someone gets shot in the head. Our logic says if somebody gets shot in the head, they die. I mean, that's pretty much our logic, right? If somebody gets shot, they die. To us, that makes logical sense. So what happens in a war film, for example, when a soldier is in battle and gets shot in the head, but is still alive?
Did you really shoot me in the head?
Yeah, buddy.
Another hang a lantern moment. I mean, the characters know it's crazy that Axe is still alive at this point. I mean, he's shot in the head. I got shot in the head, what? But they point out the logic flaw. They accept it. That helps us accept it, and we move on. Now, a little side note here. This doesn't mean that you just make stuff up, right? You make something up, and then you have a character say it, and everybody's going to be like, oh, okay, I'll go along with it. You can't do it all the time, but you can do it at key moments and at moments that matter. And in this movie, this example that I'm pulling from Lone Survivor, it's based on a true story, and these things actually did happen. The filmmakers went to great lengths to make sure that they were honoring the wounds that were inflicted by these men, and Axe really did get shot in the head and continued to fight. So they're trying to honor what's going on, but we as viewers, when we watch that, that would be a moment where we might check out. So if you watch Lone Survivor, you're going to see a lot of these lantern moments, especially during the battle scene, because there's lots of things that just keep happening that we might think, well, that's nobody could live through that. Nobody could survive that. Nobody could keep doing that. And yet these men, they kept doing that. So hanging a lantern, you just kind of have to be judicious with it and just be aware of how you're using it. But it's for minor things, and it's for little minor breaks where there's a break in either the plot or in logic. One other piece to consider is that in both of these cases, in these examples I showed you, it makes a little light of the situation. I mean, there's lots of stuff going on, but it kind of lightens the tone. Sometimes hanging a lantern can be used as a comedic moment or just a lighter moment. So hanging lanterns can also help with pacing and tone. So like you've got a bunch of heavy stuff and you need just a little break, just a breather, just a little lighter moment. Sometimes hanging a lantern can help serve that purpose and help cover a minor flaw in plot or logic. So let me give you a few tips for using hanging a lantern. So using this cheat, using this tool. Before I do that, it would really help me out if you interact in some way. If you're finding value, like, subscribe, bell. If you haven't done all those things, really appreciate it. Leave a comment. If you know of a great lantern moment, drop it in the comments below so other people can find other examples. If you can start to identify lantern moments, it helps you be able to more easily include them in your writing and know when you should include them. So, okay, what are some tips for using? Well, typically, a lantern moment is done in dialogue. Okay, that's occasionally an actor's look is going to do that, but you can't always count on that when you're writing your script. So you're writing a spec script, you need this kind of moment because you know readers might be checking out just a little bit and you want to add a little lighter moment. You're going to do that in there, and it's like, okay, I'm going to add this moment. You should probably do it in dialogue. Okay, do it in dialogue, and then when they're filming it, if it makes it that far and they film it and the actor can play it off, then they'll probably drop the line of dialogue and just have it with a look. But it's better to include it in the line of dialogue. So, and that's where lantern moments really shine, because we have to see the character is buying into this moment. And if the character isn't buying into it, well, we're not going to buy into it. So we want to see them buying into this moment. A second tip is whoever says the lantern thing, it needs to be the right character. So this has to be something that is said after you've established a character. It can't be too early on, because we may not know, is this character being sarcastic? Are they being funny? Are they trying to make a joke? Like, I don't really know. So I'm guessing that many of you have probably seen Black Widow that came out very recently. Natasha, right? If you've seen any of the Marvel movies, Black Widow herself, Natasha, is less likely to say a hanging lantern line. But if you watch this movie, her sister Elena, she's far more likely, right? So she's far more likely to say a lantern moment kind of line, and she actually does in the movie. So you have to pick the right character to say it. So that's the second tip. A third tip is any lantern line has to feel organic to what is happening, and it has to be motivated Okay, so the character saying it has to have a really good reason to say it. There's a great moment of this in the recent Fast and the Furious film, if you've also seen that. You know, one of the characters, Tyrese Gibson's character, is talking about, like, we've done crazy things, like, how are we still alive? We are invincible. And they're kind of commenting on the fact that characters in Fast and Furious rarely die, even though it looks like they might have died, or they're doing these crazy stunts and they're still alive. So Tyrese Gibson's character is kind of poking fun at that, and we know that going in, and so when the characters start to recognize that and kind of play along with it, it helps us play along with it, and we kind of ignore it in a sense. The last tip I'll give you is remember that when you use a lantern, right, you're hanging a lantern on something, that it is for minor elements only. I mean, if you have a major plot hole, okay, no amount of lanterns is going to help you navigate out of that. I mean, you got to fix the plot hole. If you have a major logic hole, okay, no amount of lanterns is going to fix that. You're going to have to find a way around that logic hole. If it's a major problem, you're more than likely going to be doing a bunch of rewriting. If it's something very, very small, something that people kind of bump on just a little bit, okay, now maybe a lantern line or moment might actually just kind of let you cheat around and just keep going in your story. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell if you haven't done all those things. Again, I really do appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. It just helps people find this channel. And when you go to tell a story, whether you are hanging a lantern or not, tell a story that matters. See you later.